For some information of how a series circuit works, and actually quite simple to work through and solve. There's three equations you're going to need. The first one here, R series, is R1 plus R2 plus on and on and on. Adding resistors in series is very simple because you just add them. The other things you'll need is V equals IR and P equals IV. So your first step should always be figuring out, well, what is the total resistance of the circuit? So that's going to be 12 plus 16 plus 8. And it's 12 plus 16 plus 8, or 36 ohms. Because all I had to do was take 12, 16, and 8 and add them together. Now that I know the total resistance, I can find out the total current. So if I want to find out the total current, I'll use V equals IR using the full 72 volts at 36 ohms, and I get a current of 2 amps. One of the nice things about any single series is the 2 amps runs through the entire circuit. So what's the current in R1, R2, and R3? Very simple. For all of them, it's 2 amps. Now if I want to figure out what's the voltage drop across each one, V equals IR. So for, say, number 1, V equals IR, V equals 2 times 12, which comes out to 24. This one would be 2 times 16, or 32 volts. And this would be 2 times 8, or 16 volts. And another example here. Again, starting with our total, 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4, that's a total of 16 ohms. Taking a look at the total current, V equals IR, so 64 equals I times 16. Our current comes out to 4 amps. So the current in R1, R2, R3, and R4 is 4 amps. Be the same everywhere. Voltage, that will be V equals IR. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. So 8 volts, 16 volts. 4 times 6 is 24. And once again, 4 times 4 is 16. The last thing I didn't do on the first circuit, I'll do it on the second circuit. The last thing is power. So for R1, P equals IV. So I know that it's 4 amps, and I solve for 8 volts. That gives me 32 watts. For R2, I would be looking at 4 amps at 16 volts, so 64 watts. Sorry, that should be a W there. R3, 4 amps at 24 volts, that's 96 watts. R4, 4 amps at 16 volts, again, 64 watts. Now from the power source, so total, we have 4 amps at 64 watts. So 4 amps at 64 watts is 256 watts. I'm sorry, 4 amps at 64 volts is 256 watts. You'll notice if I did 32 plus 64, grabbing a calculator now, 32 plus 64 plus 96 plus 64 came out to a total of 256. Now, this makes sense on an energy conservation standpoint. My 4 resistors consumed a total of 256 joules every single second. My power source generated 256 joules every single second.